Right now in the UK, teaching is a skills shortage. A lot of people are running away from the classroom. And it really is not easy. If you do not have a calling to be a teacher, you will not survive. And so they are making out a call for Nigerian teachers. As I speak now, they are looking for early years teachers from Nigeria. And you'll be paid to come in. They are not employing from the country, they are employing from Nigeria.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to welcome our guest today, Rosemary Uduame. Okay, she started as a teacher in Nigeria, as a successful teacher. You also built one of the largest special schools in Nigeria. You know, when I say special school, I can count the numbers of diasporas in your school, even when in Nigeria. And you left Nigeria to UK, and you're also doing very well there. And there is a lot more to learn from you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Rosemary once again, our facilitator for today's training. All right, now tell us what do you have for us today?
Okay, and because I'm a teacher in Nigeria, so it's really close to my heart what I have for you today. I'm going to start with telling you a story. In Nigeria, I felt like I was a superstar. I mean, I was a teacher, and like he said, I wasn't just a teacher, I was a school owner. And so the first time I got to the UK, I was and I went to a classroom. I was tongue tied because I didn't know what to do. So I stepped back a bit and I told my agent that, you know what, send me to another school, but I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I want to be a teaching assistant. And the reason I did that because I needed time to stay back and observe how teachers do it. And I learned a lot. And I was a teaching assistant for about a few months. When when I was doing it, I was going back to study and I came back with the courage. And one of the things I learned is what I'll share with you now. I know in schools, when I used to be a school leader here in Nigeria, I would be hammering my teachers about lesson plan. I need your lesson plan. I need your lesson plan. And as teachers, we do a lot of things without knowing why we do them. So what I'm going to share with you today is effective teaching principle. It's an effective teaching principle and it's called best teaching principle. The word best is not just best because it is the best. Best is not a scientific name or a name, but best, BEST, is an acronym for something. And that's what I want to share with you today. Dr. Kande mentioned that in this platform, that any update on the teaching should be shared. Now, right now in the UK, teaching is a skills shortage. A lot of people are running away from the classroom. And it really it is not easy. If you do not have a calling to be a teacher, you will not survive. So they are making out a call for Nigerian teachers. So there's something out. In fact, I saw it and I don't know if I had permission to post it, but as I speak now, they are looking for early years teachers from Nigeria and you'll be paid to come in. They are not employing from the country, they are employing from Nigeria. So when I share these principles, these are principles that when you want to go for your first interview, this is what they'll be looking out for. Because one of the interview styles you do, they'll give you a classroom and tell you plan a lesson and present it. And then people will come in to watch that lesson. And if you come with the strength and with what you learned in Nigeria, my brothers and sisters, it will not work totally well. So that's what I want to share today. I'm going to start from the beginning. And the word best, the best as a thing, it comes from cognitive research. And I'm going to share the research with you. Now, cognitive science teaches us that memory is a process by which information is first of all encoded. So and the reason that this principle came was from the research on science, cognitive science. I'm a psychologist, so I'm going to share a bit of psychology, but I will not go deeply into it. So every single time people remember things, remember that memory starts from, first of all, you see, you hear, you feel. So you encode it, you take it in. And the second time, and it moves from you encoding it to you retaining it. You retain it by storing it. And it moves from retention to you being able to retrieve what you have I have learned. So this cognitive science is the science behind the principle of BEST. And I'm going to go as fast as I can. Now, BEST is an acronym, BEST, an acronym that represents, first of all, you begin with a retrieval practice. And what I'm presenting to you now is how to present a lesson. Every single lesson you go into a classroom, the way you plan it, the first activity should be, how am I going to begin with a retrieval practice? Retrieval practice simply means I want to check your prior knowledge that will help you, because you don't learn in abstract. Let's say, for instance, the first topic, I'm a science teacher, and the first topic I thought my children was, I taught them about the DNA. And after teaching them about DNA, I'm going to move to the next topic where I want them to do Prägnanz squares. But for them to be able to do Prägnanz squares, they need to have a knowledge of DNA. So I'll start my lesson with retrieval practice. I'll tell them to retrieve what they learned. Practice retrieval. Then E stands for your ability to engage your learners with their learning objective. Now, a learning objective for us is so important because the learners have to know, what am I going to gain? Just like in this lesson now, I'm going to share my learning objective. The learning objective helps the learner to focus. Today, I'm going to learn from A to W. I'm not going to get to Z, and they'll focus. Then the next thing, the S, it stands for structure. How are you going to structure your lesson? And then T, things about the thinking development. That is what the acronym BEST is all about. The learning objective of today's lesson, I'm going to take you a bit back. I want to be able to help teachers to understand not only what the best principle is, but how they apply it in the class setting. That's what I aim to teach today. And I would test that at the end. Say, do you know what BEST stands for? And are you able to apply it? Now, let's go to the big idea. People think, and this is how I thought before. I always say in this platform, I've said it a million times, that I have children that I homeschooled. I homeschooled my children. And I had the audacity to do it because at that point, I felt that teaching was, I know it, so I'll just share the information that I know to my students, to my children, and they'll know it. But when I research more, and from my experience in teaching, I understand that teaching is not simply your ability to talk. Teaching is not standing in front of someone to share information. Teaching is not just delivery. Teaching is not just, I'm delivering a lesson, his child is listening to the lesson, and so teaching is done. No, teaching is your ability. And we learned this, and I remember because Dr. Akande was one of my lecturers in this, and he taught me that teaching, learning always comes about when there is action. So I learned something, and to show that I have learned it is my ability to apply my knowledge. So without knowledge being able to be applied, teaching has not taken place. You have simply passed information. So there's one thing to pass information, there's another thing to actually be able to teach. Okay. So now the problem in the classroom, what problems we have in the classroom, and I'm not just talking about the classroom that I face every day in the UK, but I'm also talking about the classroom that you experience every day in Nigeria. And I am comparing. One of the problems we have in the Nigerian classroom is that the children have too much information. In a typical Nigerian classroom, you just go there and you drop the information. You keep on dropping. And and then the next day you're like, why are you forgetting everything that I've taught you? So the problem we have is that the working memory that the child is supposed to use is so limited, but the information is more than the working memory. So we have something called information overload. They have too much information to deal with. Let's talk about the working memory. And it's important. I tell teachers that it's important to know what you're doing and how, if you know the thought or the science behind teaching, it helps you in the actions that you take in the classroom. So the problem is, why are students struggling? I taught this girl photosynthesis today, and the next day she does not understand it. I taught them quadratic equation. I even did the steps, and yet the child does not understand. So the problem, so when as a teacher you face is you don't just keep on saying, oh, this girl is a mumu. This boy just does not have sense. You need to take your time and say what is really happening. And why students struggle to remember effectively is because working memory is limited. Remember, I said that memory is about, first of all, encoding, and then the third level of it, you engage, And then the second level you engage, and then the third level you are able to retrieve. So it's one thing you've told them they've encoded, but how do you get them to retain? So working memory is limited, and because it's limited, they forget. The working memory can only hold something just for a few minutes. There's a lot of information. If it's one thing that I'm teaching a child can hold, but I've taught him one, two. I've taught him step one, step two, step three. By the time I get to step four, step one has gone away. Because the working memory just takes in, and because he has limited space, he has to let out the one that came first, so that the one that will come last will. So it's like putting something in a room, and the room is a very small room, and I start telling people to go in, it will get to a point that no one can fit in again. That the only way I can fit people into that room is to open a back door for the people who are in initially to leave. That is how the human working memory is. So too much information causes too much work overload, and too much overload causes students to struggle and not remember. And then we beat ourselves up. I've been teaching and these children are not getting it. It's because we are overloading them with information. You know, the first time I came to the UK and I entered a classroom and I sat as a teaching assistant to watch, I was like, is this all? These children, why are they pampering these children like this? Until I understood the science behind it. People say that the children that come from Nigeria are really, really, really sharp. And the children abroad are not as sharp as children in Nigeria. But I asked the question, Nigerians, as sharp as we are, how many things have we invented? As sharp as we are, how many changes have we, how many ways have we applied the knowledge that we have learned? We're really good at memorizing. We're really good at giving back what our teachers gave us. So I told you about the three levels of memory. We encode the information. At some level, we retain the information, but we never get to the point of being able to retrieve the information or apply and the information. So this learning practice aims to make children not just to learn to know, but to learn to do. Now, why is it important that you don't just go to the classroom and give out information? It's about strategy. Why is teaching strategy important? If you sit down as a teacher and not just as a speaker, but you enter as a teacher, you learn strategies that will help reduce the workload, the overload that students have. You will learn to be able to structure the information, and you will learn to build understanding step by step. I know a lot of teachers know to this part. I know how to break down instruction step by step, but you need to go beyond that and learn how to reduce the workload. So now we'll go to the best principle. And this is the crux of the matter. Okay. Okay. The crux of the matter is, let's talk about that B. Remember what we said the B was? The first thing we do at that B is, I said we'll retrieve past information. We activate prior knowledge when we do B. And I'll show you how to do B. Every single time, I'm going to rush, then I'll show you the examples. The B, which is the first part of your lesson, is you're activating knowledge. Then the next part of your lesson, which is the E, you're directing attention. And then the S part, you begin to reduce cognitive load by modeling. Do not load me with too much information. I will show you step by step. Then the last part, which is T, you strengthen your learning through reflection, through challenges, through feedback. At this point, you're testing recall. You're testing the ability to go back and retrieve what they got in. And the more you test, the more that this knowledge is solidified and it stays, and the more they are able to apply it. So let's go with an example. I started this training. I actually wanted to use a Google Classroom where I make you actually do it. But let's rush through it, then I'll make you do it so that I'll see how the lesson goes. So the first thing is your do now. Here, and I'm going to also post an example of a lesson plan. A lesson always starts with a do now. A do now is that recall. We start with a retrieval. The do now is, like I said, my first lesson with my children was DNA. And my second lesson, I finished teaching DNA. I'm moving to use Prägnanz squares. I'm moving to teach them how to use Prägnanz squares. But the knowledge of DNA is what they need to be able to do Prägnanz squares. So what I'll do, I will retrieve the knowledge of DNA. My lesson notes will be the first thing they do immediately they walk into the class. And I can tell you that in every single classroom here, once a child walks into the class, the first thing they do on the board is an activity. And that activity is really short, 5 to 10 minutes. They want them to quickly recall. No textbooks allowed, just recall, recall. They'll tell you, what did you learn last week? And I've already constructed questions that I taught last week that will be relevant to this week's learning, and I need them to recall in 5, 10 minutes. Sometimes it's not something that they write in their book. It could be use a whiteboard. I'll tell you in 5, 3, 4, tell me what DNA stands for. In this, where is DNA located in the human cell? The child is quickly recalling. And because they've done this so much, they have a practice of going back into their long-term memory, retrieving it, and they keep on doing it. And by the time they do it once, twice, thrice, it stays. And then the second part of my lesson starts with me engaging them with explaining to them, what am I going to teach you today? Today, I'm going to teach you about pugnant squares. Pugnant squares might be a deep and thick topic, but today we're just going to settle on who invented the repugnant square, why is the repugnant square is useful. When I do that, the children already have an expectation. Cognitive load is reduced at this point. At this point, their working memory is not being stressed too much. They know, they focus on what they need to focus on and leave what they don't need to focus on. Once I've engaged with the objective, and you can engage in the objective in different ways. I can explain the why. I can tell you that today we're going to do this. Why? Sometimes I make them, if I'm teaching, I teach science and I also teach psychology. If I'm doing a science lesson, I'll tell you the relevance of what you're going to learn today to your everyday life. I could tell you, I'll show you a video about a biologist, how his knowledge of DNA made his life better or made his work better. By the time I make them engage in their objective, this is me giving them the why. They will now recognize and say, okay, this is why I need to learn this. And they will focus. Once I have finished, I've done the do now, I've retrieved memory, I've helped them to remember, and then I've engaged in why I want this to be done. The next thing I do is guided practice. I go straight into the lesson. And that lesson always starts with what I do, explicit instruction. Why I call this part explicit is the children need to see how I think through the process. This is where the teaching goes. I'm explaining it. It's explicit because at this point, the children need to see how I'm thinking through it. I'm defining what DNA is or what pugnant square is. I'm showing them what pugnant square. I could use a video, I could use slides, I could use an activity, but it's explicitly instructing them on what I want them to learn. I do it actively. And this part of the lesson is called I do. Our lesson plan here, I will post an example, starts with do noun, I do, we do, you do. So this part of the lesson is I do part. I do is where the teacher is the one doing the work. I am the master of the information, and I'm giving you that information step by step. I've broken it down. Last on Friday, I taught my children physics on how to calculate velocity speed. In order for me to teach them how to do the velocity speed, I broke it down into 4 or 5 steps. I said, first of all, when you have the question, I need you to search what values is the question giving me? Is the question giving me frequency? Is the question giving me time? What value? That's step one. Step two, I want them to be able to say, okay, what equation, based on the values that I have, what equation will work for me to solve this problem? Step three, I told them, begin. So now that you have the values, you have the equation, I want you to substitute. I want you to take the values and substitute in the equation, then calculate. And when you finish calculating, the next thing I want you to do is to check your units. Are you doing meters per second? I broke it down into step by step. I showed them my thinking. I showed them my why. And once I'm done with this, the next thing I move to is we do. Remember, the first step is do noun, and do noun's aim is to retrieve and strengthen prior knowledge. The next step is I engage with the objective. And the reason I engage, because I want the students to know why. I want them to focus on what we are learning today. And then the third step is I do. And here, students need to see the way I think through it. Students need to understand the steps very clearly. And when you're presenting this explicit knowledge, you don't just give. You give a little bit, you stop, you check understanding. You move again, give, check understanding. So if I'm checking, the first step of calculating frequency speed is I want you to recognize values. I've taught you, I'll stop, give you an example. Check, we all understand. I move to the next step. The next step is that I want you to be able to look at an equation. I stop, I check. That is how you do. You don't just come and drop. They are watching you. Those that are going to be supervising you are watching. How much information is this teacher dropping at once? Then when you move on, and some of you would, I know that the last time we did this last Sunday, there was a lady that was talking about social media. Here, there are companies that take teachers to teach online, and they want a lot of Nigerian teachers who teach children online. Your interview, when you're being interviewed, they'll ask you to present a lesson. That's how the interview is. They'll say, do a video presenting a lesson. You need to follow a lesson structure. You don't just come and say, I'm really good at maths or English, and then start presenting the lesson. They want to see how the lesson is structured. And this is the model way lessons are structured. When you're done with giving explicit information, the next thing you do is we do. Now, we do is called guided practice. Is I've done it by myself. I have calculated it by myself. Now let's do it together. You ask students, what's the first thing we do? And they'll tell you, Miss, the first thing we do is check values. Yes, value. This is where you correct the misconceptions. You are guiding the practice. Let them lead, but you are there guiding. Once there's a misconception, you put them back on track, but you're doing it together. Once you have established we do, and what this we do does, it prevents the child from having misconception. It helps them build the confidence. So I'm holding, just like the child has seen me walk, a little baby has seen me walk. And the next step is I want you to walk. So I hold your hand, and then I gradually remove my hand. It builds the child's confidence. It supports memory consolidation. So they're like, okay, I made a mistake. This teacher corrected me. And then the last step is you do. I have stopped scaffolding you. The we do stage is me scaffolding. I'm giving you a scaffold. I'm guiding you. I'm on your left. I'm on your right. I'm in front of you. Just keep on walking. When you're about to fall, I'll come out and hold you. But then we move to the last step where the scaffolding is totally removed. And then I give you work to do. I'll probably give you something very easy. Just a little, the values that we did in we do, I'll change the values a little and let you do by yourself. And once I know that that is solid, I will begin to give you something harder. What you aim to achieve now is to build mastery, to free working memory, and to support and make sure that they do. Now, when they do this, we do or you do, that's they are now doing it. It it gives the student the opportunity to practice that retrieving from long-term memory. Okay. Once all that is done, the last step of every teaching practice is feedback, reflection. People call it plenary session, where they go back and they connect to their learning objective. You start teaching, you start asking them, what did you learn from this lesson? Give me feedback. You and how I do it, and there are different ways of doing it. You might not ask them straight on. I'll give you misconceptions. I'll tell you something wrong, and I'll give you a problem. And I want you to apply the knowledge that I taught you to be able to solve that problem. It could be, and what I'm trying to achieve is I want you to reflect. I'm trying to get feedback. I can give you a misconception and I want you to correct the misconception. Let's say a teacher that is teaching English, I will do a sentence and I'll scramble the punctuation marks and I say, is this sentence correct? What the child will now do is to think, no, they told me that a full stop comes after a sentence, or there should be a pause with a comma, or when someone is talking, there should be inverted quotation marks. I will scramble the problem and allow you to apply that knowledge to solve a problem. So, honestly, that is the end of my lesson. I wanted to start with a do noun attempt, and I'm going to post an example of a lesson plan. And I ask you that if you are given an opportunity to have an interview, especially in schools outside Nigeria, you need to create a structure. And when they ask you, what are you trying to achieve with this first structure? You don't just say my lesson plan outside. You need to know what I'm trying to achieve at every time. And another thing I want to say, when children are doing guided practice, at the point when they are doing their you do, which is the last part, that's when you're walking around and checking. That's when you're checking understanding and doing individual checking to know that every child is on board.